Street Apologist. Street Apologist.
My name is Vocab Malone. The name of the show is The Street Apologist. So you guys already see the first guy up to bat on this very special installment is Alexander Crummell. Alexander Crummell. Now, if you're watching Street Apologist for the first time, kind of wondering about the strange tone, you know what I'm saying? I have a different way to approach things. Let me just say this. Yeah, I mess around. Yeah, we joke around. But at the same time, I'm serious about this topic. And in fact, I'm excited about this topic. And I would like you guys for this show actually to kind of participate along. So when I bring somebody up, what I would love to see you guys do, is actually Google these people while I'm speaking and find out what other information you can find out about them and drop it in the live chat. And if you find a good factoid, I will actually do my best to read what you have contributed. So let's do open source apologetics, meaning contributions by the community as we go. And if you're watching this after the fact, if you find some great links to share, put them in the comments, okay? Let me get a drink of my Italian soda first here, raspberry vanilla. Oh boy, that's good. So let's start with Alexander Crummell. Remember, again, you guys find links and help me out here, all right? All right. This is a primary source here, and I'm going to read to you about this guy. He is quite amazing. If you know who W.E.B. Du Bois is, he wrote a very important work. Not saying we agree with everything in there, but it's very important to understand the struggle of the Black American. It's called The Souls of Black Folk, right? And in that, he has a whole chapter dedicated to Crummell, his mentor. Now, Crummell was certainly a churchman, certainly a Christian, certainly proclaimed the gospel. Not so much with Du Bois. Du Bois is still an important intellectual, especially in the field of sociology. Nonetheless, his main mentor was a man sold out to the gospel. And it's interesting. And I'm going to read some of Crummell's own words here. And let me show you some of what he said in this work titled The Regeneration of Africa, okay? Let me know. You guys can still see me? All right, let me stand up straight because I know I got the book in front of my face. So this is Crummell's own words. So you're going to learn about him from his own pen. The great principle which lies at the basis of all successful propagation of the gospel is this, namely, the employment of all indigenous agency. Christianity never secures thorough entrance and complete authority in any land, save by the use of men and minds somewhat native to the soil. And from the very start of the Christian faith, this idea has always been illustrated in the general facts of its conquest. We just got to stop right there. He is killing it already. Now you see who he is. He lived from 1819 to 1898. I got him described here as a missionary, pastor, visionary, professor. But these particular 6 folks that we're doing tonight, I'm categorizing all as educators and intellectuals. Now, it's not that the other people we're going to do later aren't educators or intellectuals, but I've got to group folks somehow. So I'm grouping him in the educator intellectual class. Now, if you notice right away, what's he dealing with? He's dealing with missiology. That's right. Write down that word. That's a word that you study in seminary and that missionaries study as well as those who theorize about missions, because the way you theorize about missions affects how people actually end up doing missions. So this is very, very significant. So when it comes to that, he has an insight that it took a lot of, to be honest, European and white evangelical types a lot longer to realize. Because here's what happened. During part of the missions boom, some common mistakes were made. Praise God for the missions boom, right? That's an amazing thing. But a lot of what was done had elements of cultural imperialism in it. They wouldn't just propagate the gospel. In the missionary's mind, a lot of time was the idea that as you become Christianized, you essentially become like a white European male. Okay? And so you change the way you dress, you change your name, all kinds of things that are not actually relevant to the gospel. They're actually cultural elements that the Christians evangelizing the native folks happen to have. And they made a mistake of putting them in the same bucket. That is a problem. And they often didn't rely upon the strengths of the indigenous peoples as they became saved. They focused less on training them or leading them as a sort of a shepherd, almost as like a paternal figure, instead of actually equipping the indigenous peoples themselves to become the leaders in their context. Let me give you a great example. In the Bible, remember Timothy? What does he do? Well, let me give a better example. Titus. Titus is it seems indigenous to Crete. Paul trains Titus. Titus becomes the pastor and appoints elders in that area. That's a perfect example of biblical missiology. Okay? And so my point is, Alexander Crummell realizes this important gospel point, and I wish that it would have been heeded by the broader culture quicker, and it didn't quite happen. So you can see that sometimes not being part of the majority culture is an advantage. And so Crummell is a thought leader in this area, and he was able to sort of think outside of the mainstream box because of his position, and he was right. He was right. Continuing on. Remember, this chapter, this work is called The Regeneration of Africa. What's regeneration, everybody? That means being saved, being born again, right? And this is Du Bois' mentor. I wish Du Bois would have kept some of the evangelical tendencies of Crummell. Oh, how I do. Continuing on. In the work of Jewish evangelization, our Lord himself employed the agency of Jews. Catch that? For the evangelization of Greeks, he employed indeed Jews, but Jews who had become Hellenized. He's talking about Paul especially. Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles. This makes so much sense. It's strategic. We go forth and we proclaim the gospel, but we want to be wise as we can as we do it, right? At an early period, the Romans were to be brought under the influence of Christianity, and although the faith was introduced among them by an agency which was exotic, that means Jews, yet Romans themselves stamped the impress of the faith upon the empire and strangled nigh to death in less than 3 centuries its fierce and vulpine paganism. What a vocabulary this guy has. Somebody look up vulpine, vulpine, drop it in the live chat. I want to see the definition for that. So in like manner, it became rooted in the soil of Britain. So likewise at a later period in Russia and Scandinavia. Notice his global mindedness here as well. He could just be thinking of New York or America, but see how global minded he is? That's what being a Christian does to you, or should. Hardly a generation passed away in either of these cases ere the zealous and adventurous pioneers of the new system resigned their work and handed over their prerogatives to the hardy and convicted sons of the soil. Wow, what a great pen this guy has. You hear that? Hardy and convicted sons of the soil. He's saying eventually they handed the work over to the indigenous folks and they became the leaders. It seems clear, then, that for the evangelization of any country, the main instrumentality to be set to work is that of men of like sentiments, feelings, blood, and ancestry with the people whose evangelization is desired. The faith, so to speak, must needs become incorporated with the people's mental, moral, and even physical constitution, vitalize their being, and run along the channels of their blood. Ooh, that's good. It's saying it essentially becomes native to who they are. You see that? Now, this principle applies in common with all other lands to Africa. So now he's taking a general principle and he's going to apply it specifically to Africa. Now, I'm going to stop a second. Again, these are not obscure people in the sense of their impact, but they're often obscure because, number one, American Christians don't know that much about church history. Number two, because of the segregation, a lot of times these folks are forgot, which is very unfortunate. But there's also an apologetic value here. What does this show if you think about a lot of the charges of what some of the modern critics of Christianity offer? These folks offer a counterpoint to those polemics against Christianity. Keep that in mind as I read. By the way, thank you, Carm, for rocking that vulpine definition that Crummell used. It means relating to a fox or foxes. That's interesting. Wow. Vulpine paganism. That sounds like a great book title. All right. Continuing on. It is under God the condition of the success of the cross throughout that vast continent. Notice Crummell's heart cry is the success of the cross. This is a great guy. The success of the cross. Is that what we care about most? That's what he cared about most. All this, however, is but theory. See, it starts there, but that's how everything starts. The facts, which more especially prove it, are the successful missions of the English in West Africa, both Episcopal and Wesleyan. He's saying that English have had some success in West Africa, especially the Episcopalians and Wesleyan. And now watch what he's going to say why. Nothing can be more glorious than the heroic, almost godlike self-sacrifice of their missionaries. For nigh 40 years to introduce Christianity among the natives, nothing on the other hand more discouraging than the small results which at first followed their efforts. I love the way this guy has a heart for missionaries. If you're listening to this channel, if you're watching this right now, do you support a missionary? Do you support a missions agency? does your church, if you don't or your church doesn't, maybe you should find a new church, first of all. Excuse me, but I'm being honest. Or second of all, you need to go find yourself some missionaries and mission agencies somewhere. I really think you do. You either go or you send. You either go or you send. And yes, I do. I used to do a lot more at a different time in my life, but I still do support some. I wish, and I wanted to be more to what I was able to do a few years ago. I think I'm going to get back there. But what my point is, I still do support some, specifically to do things in the Middle East in the Arabic language. Okay, now back to this. But by and by one native and then another, and another was raised up, fitted and prepared to be preachers of the gospel. So this is a long-term strategy. The Christian faith had become engrafted upon the native stock. It swelled with the inspirations of their breath. It coursed along the channels of their veins. He writes poetic, doesn't he? Then the truth began to spread. It had lodged itself in a new race and began to assert its authority in a new land. See, the gospel will alter culture for the better. The new soil was genial, and the divine principle, although transplanted, put forth all its original vitality, as when a new plant or seed is brought from some distant country to a new land, akin in soil and climate to its parent bed, it shoots up and spread abroad with all its former vigor and luxuriance. So Christianity, so soon as it became indigenous to Africa, commenced a successful career. And I think Crummell here is talking about West Africa. My point, which, that's where most of the slaves came from, because the Christianity is almost already could be described as indigenous to North Africa and other parts of Africa. Ethiopia, Egypt, Libya, etc., etc. But I think he especially means West Africa and other places here. Okay. And now mission stations are to be found 2,000 miles along the coast. See, I was right, West Africa. Catechists by scores are employed. Ministers are preaching the gospel on the coast and in the interior. Missions conducted by native clergymen are being carried into the strongholds of ancient, sanguinary kingdoms and are advancing with authority and power up the great Niger towards the very heart of the continent. Ooh, doesn't that excite you? And in all this, we see illustrated the great principle that for the propagation of the faith, the main lever and agency must needs be indigenous. The faith at first is an exotic in all new lands, but in order to make its roots strike deep into the new soil, men, native in blood, lineage and feelings and sentiments must needs be raised up and put to active effort. Now the Almighty, in a most marvelous manner, has been providing just this agency with almost every indigenous quality for the propagation of the faith on the continent of Africa. Millions of the Negro race have been stolen from the land of their fathers. That's true, that's kidnapping. They have been the serfs for centuries on the plantations and households in the West Indies and the United States of civilized and Christian people. By contact with Anglo-Saxon culture and religion, they have themselves been somewhat permeated and vitalized by the civilization and the Christian principles of their superiors. He does not mean superiors in intellect or anything like that, as I'm sure everyone understands, so I just want to clarify. He means in a sense of socioeconomic status. Okay. Numbers of them have become immigrants, settlers, denizens of a free republic, and of thriving colonies of the British on the west coast of Africa. And numbers more of them ever and anon immigrate from the lands of their past thraldom back, not infrequently to the very spots whence their parents were first stolen. He's saying that some people are going back to places in Africa after they get freedom. So, for example, in Liberia, for example, if you notice, read the little biography while I'm reading this. Make sure you read that, and as well as look up that link to that website, okay? Please, trying to multitask here. Hit that like button, by the way, everybody coming in. Please, please, please hit that like button. And these immigrants almost invariably profess the faith of Jesus. They are Christian immigrants, journeying across the wide ocean with Bibles and prayer books and tracts and sermons and family altars, seeking a new home amid the heathen population of Africa. So he's saying that the gospel hasn't permeated West Africa yet. Now I say that when you send out such companies of people, you send Christianity to Africa, and I would fain emphasize this remark and invite attention to it. If you send a missionary to Africa, you send indeed a good, holy, faithful minister, but he is but an individual. He may or may not plant Christianity in the field. The probability is that he will not, for the greatest of saints can only represent a partial Christianity. Hence the likelihood then almost certainly is that his work will have to be followed up by others. When therefore you send a single individual as a missionary, you do not necessarily send Christianity to Africa, albeit you send a devoted Christian. On the other hand, when you send out a company of Christian immigrants, you send a church planted on the coast of Africa, its rootlets burst forth on one side and another like the little daughters of the plantation in a tropical soil. He's talking about church planting in West Africa. Do you see what he's talking about there, guys? He's straight up talking about church planting in West Africa by folks in the Western context who were former slaves, or at least in their ancestors, and are now able to come out. By the way, guys, remind me if someone does the super chat. Okay, there's Roxby. Whoa, Roxby, you are killing it. Good thing I looked. Dang, Roxby, you're killing it. Roxby, I don't feel bad for you working all those long hours, but I'm also glad because you're pretty much sponsoring the show. I'm just saying, for real, Roxby, much love to you. You're just killing it. All right, now I lost my train of thought. What an awesome idea, though, to church plant in these contexts. I mean, this dude is a bold visionary, right? You know what I'm saying? But facts are more powerful, more convincing than mere theories. I will, therefore, attempt briefly to illustrate this principle by facts. I like this guy. Number 1, the Presbyterians have a school in Pennsylvania called the Ashmun Institute for the training of colored men for missionary duty in Africa. A few years ago, 3 of these students left the United States with their families as immigrants to Liberia. Now, when the Presbyterians sent forth this little company of Christians, they sent out organized Christianity to heathen Africa. In each of those little bands, there was a church in the house with the Bible and the preacher and baptized children, the germs of a new outgrowth of Christianity in the future. Civilization, was allied to all their life, work, and habits in their new homes. And these men, settled at Liberia, take root there. Increases given to their families there as well here. Native heathen also come into their families, work for them in these gardens, in their workshops, and on their farms, are touched by their civilized habits and moved by their family prayers and Sunday teachings. As their children grow up, they in turn become the centers to the other heathen of new and wider influences, both civilizing and Christian. He's talking about discipleship cycles there. See that? Disciples make disciples make disciples. Native converts become incorporated with them in the household of faith. By and by, these native converts raise up Christian children who, in some cases, are married to persons of the immigrant stock, and thus the native and the immigrant blood, at times both Christianized, flow mingled together through the veins of a new race through early indigenous and native. This dude is talking about Christianizing all of West Africa. That is what his goal is here. Do you guys understand that? That is powerful. That's amazing. Now, just such power, strengthened and permanent influence cannot go forth from your foreign missionary, because he is an exotic. Beneath the burning sun of Africa, he withers and pines away. He's saying white guys can't handle the hot sun. That's what he's saying. Dang, dude. And alas, too often dies, a glorious martyr for Christianity. He gave them their love, though. He says, you may die, but you're a glorious martyr for Christianity. I'm sorry. I mean, he's making a good point. He's right. This dude's just cracking me up. Alexander Crummell. Can't wait to see you in heaven, man. All right. Okay, continue on. Where did he go with the glorious fire? And when he departs to paradise, his wife and children return to Europe or America. Weak, enfeebled, bereaved, but they rarely have permanent influence in Africa. This dude is right to the core. This dude is killing it. The black Christian immigrant, on the other hand, is indigenous in blood, constitution, and adaptability. 2 centuries of absence from the continent of Africa has not destroyed his physical adaptation to the land of his ancestors. There is a tropical fitness, which inheres in our constitution. Thereby we are enabled, when we leave this country, to sit down under an African sun, and soon, with comparative ease, feel ourselves at home, and move about in the land as though we had always lived there. Children, too, are born to us in our adopted country, who have as much strength and vitality as native children, and soon we find ourselves establishing families right beside those of our heathen kinfolk. Now, you can easily see what a powerful influence that denomination of Christians, the Presbyterians. By the way, I'm just going to go here. You guys already know me. I'm Reformed. All right? When he's saying Presbyterians, he's talking about Calvinist Christians. This is when Presbyterian still meant something. All right? It still does, but you got to find out what kind of Presbyterian these days. So when he's talking about Presbyterian, he's talking about Calvinists. Notice he is giving them props, all right, for what? They specifically trained black folks to evangelize in Africa, especially in Liberia, and he's giving them love. So sometimes Calvinists will get a bad rap in these areas, but let's also give credit where credit is due, as Crummell is doing. The Presbyterian can wield by such an agency as I have described to bless and save Africa. By the way, this also lets you know that there's black Presbyterians. because who else is getting trained, right? They send thither living, concrete, organic, indigenous Christianity, and the young men and their families, trained at their institute, send it there to abide. Ooh, to abide. That's what you want Christianity to do, to abide, not just be. You don't want rice Christians, right? You're a Christian as long as you get the food. That's a problem in missions. We don't want that. The Mormon Church is a real problem with that. We want disciples, and sometimes that takes slow cook, not microwave. You know what I'm saying? This is missiology, folks. This is the theology of the Bible applied to missions. Good stuff. To be reproduced in their children, to be spread out in their families, and not to be an evanescent and fugitive thing, without root in the soil, and void of bud and fruit and flower, nor yet a tender exotic needing a hothouse carefulness and nurture, but a thing of life and robustness, mindless of sun and dews and storms and tempests, fitted to every circumstance of life and power. Such is the great power which the Almighty has given our Presbyterian brethren for planting Christianity in Africa. Now, he goes on and makes 2, 3, 4 more examples that are right here on this page, 286 of this particular book. He does the same thing with the Baptists of different varieties, and he talks about the British there. My point is, I'm not going to look at all of that. I'm not going to read everything, okay? But I'm going to look at some of it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip to this last paragraph right now, okay? All right. Dun, 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 dun. All right, here we go. Last paragraph. I have rested this matter this evening, almost, if not quite, entirely upon the one single point, that is, the evangelization of Africa. In all caps. I can present and urge it upon no lower, no inferior consideration. I recognize the need of trade, agriculture, commerce, art, letters, and government as a collateral and indispensable aids to the complete restoration of my fatherland. So this is the whole gospel he's talking about right there. That man must be blind who does not see that, but they are but collateral and auxiliary. He had his priorities straight. Nor the end and aim and object of that divine will and providence, which the Almighty has been working out by the means of institutions and governments, by afflictions and sufferings, and even oppressions during the course of centuries. Man. Now there's a whole book about Crummell. There's a lot of stuff, but I'm going to recommend a couple here. One is on Oxford University Press, written by Moses Wilson. Another one's by J.R. Oldfield, and that's on Edwin Mellon Press, 89 and 90, both of those, different dates. And then here's one by Gregory Rigsby. That's on Greenwood Press, 1987. And there's other books, but that's all I'm going to recommend now. And that comes out of that, which is a primary source reader anthology. All right, let me take a look real quick here at the live chat and see what you guys are saying. Different stuff. Nick Lewis says, I left the Presbyterian Church because of the apostasy in that church. My guess is you were PC USA. That's my guess. Hey, Ruth, how you doing? Thank you. Much love to you, too. Ken makes the point. A lot of British missionaries died of diseases they never had encountered before. What's striking is that many still went despite knowing the high mortality rate for the missionaries. Yeah, good point. You're right. And it's not that we shouldn't do that. That's the risk we take. It's just the point that, we should think about that. That was interesting. Carm says, did you know that Crummell had previously opposed colonization? His civilizing mission experiences in Liberia changed his mind. No, I did not know that. Oh, wow. Where are you finding this stuff from, Carm? Crummell believed that in order to achieve their potential, the African race as a whole, including those in the Americas, the West Indies, and Africa, needed to unify under the banner of race. Yeah, so this guy was still for his people. Because a lot of times people think of well, thank you, Carm. I see your compliment there, too. Appreciate it. You guys got to understand. You guys got to understand, okay? Let me... Oh, man, hold on. You guys' comments are actually really dope. Ken says, when do you hear thraldom today? Someone look that up. What is thraldom? Thraldom. Someone find that. So let me explain this, guys. I know that this isn't the hot trending topic. I mean, what was I drinking, by the way? That was a Italian soda. It's gone now. Just the ice is left. But it was vanilla raspberry. Really good. I made it myself. And I love to do that. If you came over to my house, I'd make you one. As long as I knew you were coming. Okay, so here's what's going on. You guys, once you get into more urban apologetic issues, you'll see that things like what I'm reading today, and the people I'm going to be talking about today, they're important for their own sake, first of all, for their own merits, right? Stephen recounts the history of Israel before he's stoned. And I'm not saying we're doing a Bible writing here, but at the same time, we should know about God's movement through our people prior to us. Now, if you understand the banner of the cross is what we stand under, then you understand Alexander Crummell may be of a different ethnicity than you, but he's our people because he's a believer in Christ. Will we not see him in heaven, right? Well, is he not our brother who will sing to the Lamb who sacrificed? Yeah. Now, he had a specific area. He had a specific thing that God called him to, I believe. And my point is, though, that these are very important apologetic points when you get into this, because you see how he acts as a counteractive response to a lot of the false charges that the Kemet's make and the Afrocentric guys who essentially worship ethnicity, those guys, and also that the Hebrew Israelites make against us. Bring up Crummell. Look at this. He didn't sell out his folks when he became a Christian. He cared about Africa, and he had a plan. The gospel was what drove him, but he still cared about. I mean, it's just good. Someone looked up thraldom real quick. Where'd it go? A couple of you looked it up, but I see Carmen. Carmen's busy tonight. A state of subjugation to an owner or master, bondage, enslavement. Okay, so that's what thraldom is. So there's Crummell. I like Crummell. By the way, these cards that you're seeing, I created those with the graphic designer a number of years ago, and I did it when I was part of a different radio program, and now I'm bringing them back out because I've never done this stuff online, and so we're going to be doing that. But this dude studied at Cambridge, lived in Liberia, wanted to Christianize the whole west coast of Africa, influenced folks in Liberia for generations to come, as well as Du Bois. He's even got a feast day in the liturgical calendar of the Episcopalian Church. That's pretty dope if you ask me.
Street apologist. Street apologist. Street apologist. Whoa. Radio.